All souls that come into existence have 3,000 chances to attain liberation. The reason the soul steps out of eternity and into the wheel of samsara is simply the decision the being makes as part of the soul's plan. Every time a soul enters into evolution, they enter the bhava chakra and ensnare themselves within samsara, or cyclic existence. The karma that accumulates over successive lives is what traps the soul deeper and deeper within the wheel of birth and death. It's generally taught that souls go through 108 existences for every species of creature they evolve through, beginning from the most pure, simple, and pleasant levels of nature, the mineral and plant kingdoms, through the animalia kingdom, and finally to the apex of mechanical evolution, the human kingdom, which for us is technically still the animal kingdom. This is a terrific and arduous journey that takes millions of lifetimes to complete. Now a few very crucial things need to be understood about this stage of evolution. You see, what I just explained here is the entire upward journey of something called mechanical nature or mechanical evolution. So this process also includes involution. The term mechanical in this context refers to the aspect of nature that functions completely automatically, habitually and instinctually, purely for survival. So all the animals and creatures that live in this level do everything automatically, without really having to think about it. They're predisposed to pursue pleasurable sensations and avoid painful ones. This level of nature is lunar, meaning that the forces of the moon are what direct and manage the evolving and devolving processes in life. The most well-known effect that we know the moon has on us is the coming and going of the tide. But in relation to the wheel of samsara, the pinnacle of this side of evolution, the animal and human kingdom, is only halfway up the wheel. The rest of the path to liberation goes through a more highly evolved and intelligent level of evolution called conscious evolution. This level of nature is solar, so life here is managed by the forces of the sun. Rather than being ruled by instinct, passion, aggression and competition, and selfish desire, the kingdoms, or more accurately, the genuses at this level do not pursue crude, physical sensations. Instead, their interest is generally to expand consciousness and serve others as efficiently as possible. I use the term genus because all the beings at this level are part of the same family, they're all human in other words. So if you noticed a few moments ago, I mentioned that mechanical evolution includes a similar process called involution. So here's where we need to understand transmigration more carefully. As soon as a soul takes its first step into existence and begins to manifest itself as a life form on a planet, its karma begins to accumulate. This karma only becomes more and more severe and complicated as the soul takes on different bodies and progresses through evolution. Any soul that has involuted into the human family has accumulated a very large amount of psychological conditioning from all of its previous lives. Our psychological makeup is the result of our entire collection of previous incarnations, including those from the mineral and plant kingdoms. The mass of conditioning, the mental aggregates that we have are abundant with crude, animalistic defects that do not belong to the conscious levels of nature. So if mechanical nature begins in the most pure and simple kingdoms and peaks at the most aggressive and passionate kingdom, the animal and human kingdom, then what do you think has happened to this so-called evolution this whole time? What has happened is, the soul has reached a point of maturity in which it has begun to involve, rather than evolve. So the soul has finally become an advanced animal or human, but the karma that it accrued over hundreds of thousands of years is reaching its limit, so the soul is starting to get worse. It's beginning to decay. This is, what in Kabbalah, is known as the halfway point. How long can a soul sustain its maturity as an intelligent animal, the kind of human that we are? The answer is 108 existences. The human kingdom or family is a great privilege that souls earn after having suffered through countless animal lifetimes. So with this awareness, if a soul still has the passionate, fearful, desire-ridden mind of an animal as a human, do you think that soul will last very long in this family? It cannot, because Mother Nature sets a limit for us. She doesn't have the capacity to handle us. We come into this human family and what do? We continue to act like animals. We compete and fight for mates, we fight for food, for territory. And we don't just use our teeth and claws like animals do, we go further and manufacture tremendous tools for killing, guns and nuclear weapons. We start wars, we pollute our own food supply. We are worse than animals. Now, because of how severe this area of spirituality is, I'm first going to explain the process of devolution before explaining liberation. Devolution is another evolutionary process in nature that, very sadly, many spiritually inclined people and scientists have no idea about. So what happens to a soul who reaches the halfway point, the human family, but fails to cleanse itself of his or her crude, instinctual, animal qualities and abide by the superior laws of nature? This is the question. Well, everything in nature runs in cycles, including evolution itself. What happens is that the cycle of birth and death in the animal kingdom begins all over again, but this time, in reverse. If a soul doesn't manage to become more advanced consciously during its journey through the human family, then his or her stay will eventually expire, and the soul will begin to descend and decay in order to return back to its pure, unconditioned, joyful state. When this happens, nature takes back the human body that it gave you, and you slowly pass through the animal kingdom all over again in order to go through the purification process of devolution. Something that I should clarify is that evolution only moves forward, just like time. It is a curve. You're either moving up the ascending arch, or down the descending arch. Now, a person can develop some bad habits and notice themselves declining more than usual, and likewise they can choose to cultivate good habits and expand their consciousness, but you can't jump back and forth between kingdoms. So once a human devolves into an animal, that's it. There's no way for that animal to immediately evolve itself back into a human again. It doesn't have the intelligence to practice the Dhamma. Now, from what I've explained so far, devolution as a means to reach enlightenment might sound like a good thing at first, and ultimately, this is for the soul's own good. But I will make something very clear. Paying karma is always a painful process. The only reason beings suffer in existence is because of karma and mental conditioning. Nature's path to liberation is a gradual process of decay and death which takes just as long as evolution. It is a painfully slow process that leads the soul deeper and deeper into the most dense and painful regions of the mind. The technical term for these subterranean dimensions is subconsciousness, or infraconsciousness, which is found within the Tritokosmos, the smallest and most condensed part of the universe. The classical term that all of us are familiar with is hell. I say that the Tritokosmos is small because it's situated within the microcosm, which is the human being. But in terms of spatial perception, the infraconsciousness is unknowably vast, just like the physical plane, so it's not much different in that respect. When it comes to the devolution experience, the species of animal that you become, and the quality of life you experience is directly proportional to the quality of mind that you last left off with. I'm not just referring to your state of mind during death. I'm talking about how much ego you have in general. If you manage to purify your defects to some degree during your last life, but you didn't attain any level of Buddhahood, then your trajectory into devolution will be a bit lighter and easier than most other people. It's logical. Everything in nature goes into its proper place according to vibration. Now at this point you might be thinking, okay, great, well I'll just try my best, and if I don't reach enlightenment, then I'll just become a bird or something, and then devolution won't be that bad. Well, the nature of the animal mind, mechanical evolution, is that it's predisposed to pursue pleasure and avoid pain. So this actually makes the animal mind worse over time, even for animals that are evolving to become humans one day, since those animals are developing conditions and limitations like fear, anger, and craving, which will make them better at surviving, hunting and mating. In other words, you're not just going to get whatever conditioning you have left chipped and hammered away in a small collection of lifetimes, and then pass through some really mild first or second level hell realm for a few years. The devolving soul must pass through all 9 spheres of hell, even if they only started off with the first 1 or 2 levels in their mind. This happens because animals get worse over time. This process is no different than the analogy of a snowball running down a hill. When you roll a snowball down a hill, it collects snow and gets bigger until it stops rolling. And when you do this with two snowballs, one big and one small, well, both of them are going down the same hill and reaching the bottom. The good news is, the smaller snowball doesn't get as big. It doesn't suffer as much. So don't become a big snowball. So what about conscious evolution? How do we escape the wheel of mechanical nature and continue an upward evolutionary ascent? Well, there are 3 ways to do this, 3 paths to liberation. I mentioned the first step, which is to purify the mind of its animal nature. The major defects that need to be eliminated are lust, anger, pride, jealousy, shame, aversion such as anxiety and fear, materialism, greed, gluttony, laziness, and obsessive-compulsive attachments. This alone results in a temporary liberation from samsara, in which the soul has skipped devolution and hell, by bringing itself back up to the elemental, mineral and plant kingdoms of nature. This is the most simple path to liberation, called the elemental path, the spiral path, or Sravaka path. It belongs to the Sravakayana or Sutrayana schools and the Theravada school. A single person on their own can follow this path, but it doesn't lead to complete self-realization and liberation. It postpones it for another manvantara or age. So these souls begin an entirely new cycle of evolution, after which they will receive the Dhamma, the cosmic teaching, again once they reach the human level. This might sound like a big disappointment at first, because you might be thinking, well, just temporarily liberation, what good is that? And then I have to go through all of those animal lives again before finally becoming human and receiving the teaching. But keep in mind that we are at the complete and utter end of this root race, so by the time you start evolving as an animal again, you may not even be a physical animal. The next root race is going to be more pure and ethereal than us, so likewise, all the animals on the planet will be different and life will be easier. The next path is the nirvanic path or the pratyeka path, which is taught in Mahayana Buddhism. This path requires a higher creation of the soul by means of tantra, or sexual transmutation. This is what medieval Western alchemy actually was, the practice of suprasexuality. A single person cannot become a nirvani on their own. Through this process, the soul becomes a more advanced kind of Buddha known as an arahant, nirvani, or pratyeka. These kinds of Buddhas are demigods or angels. Again, attaining Buddhahood as a nirvani provides partial liberation, but it can eventually lead to full liberation and self-realization. However, the journey to full liberation from this level is extremely gradual and slow, and there is always the risk of falling into devolution at any point. Nirvanis take thousands to millions of years to progress and rarely reincarnate. They are attached to their ecstasy and celestial rests, and their ordeals are small and easy to overcome. The final path to liberation is the direct path, the straight path, the path of the razor's edge. This is the Bodhisattva path. This is taught in the schools of Vajrayana and Tantrayana, which are the highest level of teaching. In Christianity, this method is described as the narrow way, as Jesus said, "Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who go in by it." Because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it. Matthew 7 verses 13 to 14. All the paths to liberation can be accomplished in one life. It is possible. Master Samuel explained in the Yellow Book that a soul should expect to attain a certain level of liberation within 10 to 20 years of serious work. But the Bodhisattva path tends to be very arduous and painful, with tremendous tests and ordeals along the way. There is also a higher aspect of wisdom that must be cultivated that the other paths don't require, which is called bodhicitta. Entire talks can be given about this specific kind of wisdom, but in summary, bodhicitta is a quality of mind that is supremely compassionate, intelligent and wise. At the same time, in a slightly different context, the same word can also mean semen, sexual fluid or sexual energy. Just like the nirvanic path, this method also requires the creation of all the solar bodies.
Samael and Vior told all of us that humanity moves in waves, and that when the human organisms when the souls, rather, the essences, enter into humanoid bodies, they are given a limited window or time span within which to escape mechanical nature and enter into conscious evolution. In other words, to start moving upwards into the superior worlds. That type of work doesn't happen mechanically or as a present from God. We have to earn it. We have to become real human beings. But nature is a system of laws, and one of those laws is that our time in between heaven and hell in a physical humanoid body is limited to 108 existences. That number 108 is deeply symbolic, but it also has a literal meaning. So it may be that we are on our 108th life, and since humanity moves in waves, we are all on our last lives. Which means that if we don't, in this life, succeed in gaining a foothold in the superior worlds, then our opportunity to take a new physical body is lost. And we will start descending into the inferior worlds. Now, naturally, this is subject to karma, cause and effect. There are many souls who are really bad, who don't get 108 lives. And there are a few souls who are really good, and so they earn a few more lives in order to keep working. So we have to define ourselves. If we do a lot of good for humanity, really help humanity in a very significant way, then we can earn an extra life. But that term, very significant, needs to be understood. And that can come in any number of forms. I mentioned Gandhi earlier, who made a significant contribution to the well-being of millions of people. It wasn't directly a spiritual thing that he did, but it improved the livelihood of many millions of people. He received the benefit of that action. I've told you before in other lectures that I know for a fact that I'm on my last life. I know it. I don't care if anybody doesn't believe me. I've had too many experiences knowing that. And that's why I'm doing what I can do. I can't do much, but I do as much as I can. So the same has to be true for anyone else who wants another opportunity. I don't have the audacity or the arrogance to assume I'm going to succeed in this lifetime. I seriously doubt it. I'm too weak. I'm too lazy. I need another life. So I'm working hard to try to earn that. And really, this is the focus. If you've ever studied Tibetan Buddhism, this is the entire focus of Tibetan Buddhism. Not on this life, on the next one. The next one is not set in stone yet. You might get one, you might not. It's not decided yet. It depends on what you do now. Your current life has limitations. At least you have the chance to practice spirituality, to practice gnosis. That's huge benefit. And if you take advantage of that and really use it well, you can earn an even better opportunity in your next life. Now that brings up an important memory, something that's coming in my mind now that's really important about this. There are many prophecies and predictions about the end of this era, and I hinted at it a moment ago when I said nature is starting to consume things. It is true that humanoids are now in their 108th lives, and that most of the human beings on this planet who are dying now will not come back into new bodies. This is true. It's also true that this race is nearing its end, and over the next number of years, it will be completely wiped from this planet. This is also true. No one knows the date and the hour, but it will happen. So that begs the question, if everything's going to end, why would I want to come back into a new body? You don't have to come back here. That's the answer. And to me, that's pretty enticing. I don't want to come back here. There are billions of planets. Billions where you can continue working. We just don't know about them. There are also other levels of existence, other dimensions where you can continue working. And Samael Aun mentioned this in his lecture about the mysteries of life and death. He said that if you earn it, you can take a new body in another world, in another place that will help you to keep working on yourself. So don't feel scared and afraid about what's happening on this planet. We need to be concerned. We need to be aware of it. But it also doesn't mean that we're limited by it. We need to take it as an inspiration to do better and to earn a better chance. Any other questions? Yes. So the question is, if we find ourselves in hell, what can we do that's beneficial there? The answer depends on whether you're already dead or not. The answer depends on that. The reality is that we are in hell already. We just haven't realized it. This physical world is sinking into hell. Hell is defined by a complication of energy, where the laws become more and more complicated in order to reduce matter down to its simplest forms. That's what hell does. It applies more and more laws to break down matter and energy. And that's happening all around us. The proof of it is to visit any big city and see how complicated suffering is becoming. How difficult. It is the sinking of matter and energy into deeper and deeper laws to start the process of purification. And we can also see nature reflecting that change. Nature is starting to implement that process of breaking things down. And if you don't believe me, just watch the news. It's been happening, it's been building for a century. And it's going to continue building. Is there another question?
If we find ourselves in hell, is there anything beneficial that we can do there? Or is there nothing to do but to go through the purification?
If you awaken consciousness in hell, good. Become aware of it. Learn about it. Try and find out why you are where you are. If you are there, it's because you belong there. So what brought you there? If you still have a physical body, then take advantage of that experience so that you don't have to go back there when you lose that physical body. So I would suggest that you pray to your Divine Mother and ask her to teach you why you're there and how to change it. If you awaken consciousness in hell after you've already lost your physical body, you can do the same thing, but it's going to be more difficult for you. You're going to have to make some pretty serious negotiations to change your situation. It won't be easy. It can be done. The door to repentance is always open. On that note, I should mention something. This whole process that I explained today about what happens after death when we review our life experience and then we appear in the courts. There's an opportunity there to make a negotiation. You can negotiate your path, but not if you're not aware that you're there. If you're not aware of being in that court when you're dead, how can you negotiate? You need to be awake. So if you awaken consciousness and die, and then you're awake when your case is presented to the court, you can make an appeal. They have lawyers there in that court. It sounds weird, but there are beings who will intercede on your behalf and who will help you make deals and arrangements so that you can continue working on yourself in a new physical body with the circumstances necessary to do so. But you will have to pay for it. Everything costs something. If you're willing to make that kind of exchange, it can be done. You can even make that arrangement now. But to do it, you need cognizance. You need to be awake.
So if you go through the purification process, for example, would you incarnate into another body, or
Yeah, that gets really complicated.
Yeah, where is it?
The process of being recycled by nature is very complicated and very painful because of how complicated and painful our mind is. Nature works in dimensions. So to try to explain this briefly, we know that the physical world is between the heavens and the hells. And everything physical has a psychological aspect because all the dimensions are interpenetrating. Right now we have these physical bodies, which are the sort of vessel or representative physically of the ego, right? And also of the consciousness. Everything that we are as a person, both positive and negative, is represented in the physical body. When that physical body dies, Yeah, it's all in the book Hell, Devil, and Karma. It's explained there. It's true. When that physical body dies, all that energy of the psyche has to be handled by nature, both the good parts and the bad parts. The bad parts, of course, will be recycled in hell. And in some cases, there are physical components that help transmit that energy and manage it in the process of devolution. And generally, those are in the bodies of animals. Monkeys, pigs, dogs, rats, another example. The way this humanity is processing animals for food, chicken, pigs, cows, is related to the process of hell that we are all headed into. All of those bodies of the chickens and cows and pigs and all the animals that are being tortured, the way they're being tortured now, has some direct correlation to the karma of this humanity and how the consciousness is being processed through nature. It wouldn't surprise me at all if those bodies are the vehicles through which the egos are flowing as they get dissolved. Because whatever's in that animal is suffering a lot. Wouldn't surprise me if that was our egos of pride and vanity and fear and envy in those bodies. It would make sense. But again, I haven't confirmed that. I'm just trying to understand how that situation can exist on this planet, because it's a horrifying situation. If you've ever seen inside of a meat plant or where they're raising these animals, it is utterly reprehensible. It should not be allowed. But it's happening, and it's been happening for decades, and it's getting worse. Why? There must be a reason in nature and in our karma for that to be happening. And to me, the two point at each other. The nature of our psyche, humanity's entering into hell, there might be a relation. The point is that everything in nature has a function. Nothing is accidental. Every animal, every body, every physical body is processing energy in some way. And we're seeing a lot of suffering on this planet, not just in humanoids, but amongst the animals. And there's a reason for that. Don't assume just because you're a Gnostic student that you're going to go to heaven. Not going to happen. I promise you. Nothing is given for free. You can belong to any group you want. It doesn't give you anything. You can have all the books in your house and have a beautiful altar and go to school every week. Good for you. Doesn't prevent you from going to hell. Hell is related to the contents of your mind, the contents of your heart. So if we do die and have to pay that karma by processing through the infernal worlds, then that will be our experience after death. But that is not forever. This is a great misconception propagated by many religions nowadays, that heaven and hell are forever. They are not. The places exist forever, yes. But the souls don't stay there forever. It would make no sense to have to pay forever for something. God is not a tyrant who wants people to suffer for eternity. God is a God of love. Christ is pure love. Hell was established by Christ as an act of love to purify those souls who are not capable of purifying themselves. Thus, hell is an experience that will be sustained as long as it's needed to clean the soul of its crimes. Now, don't start thinking that, well, I didn't do much that was bad, so maybe I'll only be there for a couple of days. I wish it were like that, but it's not. We've had many bodies. For all of us, it's more than 100 in humanoid bodies. And we have a lot of karma to answer for. A lot of pride, a lot of envy, a lot of anger, a lot of lust. And that has to be purified from our consciousness. So we will enter into those worlds and gradually descend from level to level into deeper and deeper and more intense applications of pressure and heat, which pulverize the defects that we have. It is not pleasant. If you've ever had a nightmare, you've tasted it. it is extremely unpleasant. Many people ask, are the souls conscious of being in hell? Are they aware of the suffering? And the question is absolutely yes. The consciousness has to be freed. The nature of consciousness is to perceive. It is to be aware. That is its nature. But we've trapped it in defects, in vices. So when that soul, that consciousness passes through hell, and hell is pulverizing those vices to free the soul is aware of that and suffers. It's painful. And it lasts as long as it takes to destroy those defects. Hundreds of years, thousands of years. Look into your own mind. What kind of defects do you find there? And how hard are they? How deep? How strong? That will give you an indication of what you have to look forward to if you don't eliminate them now on your own. It's very serious business. Gradually, all the souls that enter into the hell realms are brought through that great recycling machine of nature. And all the forces of nature work to pulverize the defects until at the end, depending on the karma of that soul, it is projected out of it clean. And able to start again in a new cycle of evolution, in another age. Remember also that time is relative, as I was explaining. Time is relative. The experience of time in hell is extremely slow. You won't have your iPod, so you can pass the time. You won't have a good book to read or a TV to watch. You'll be revisiting and replaying the cause of the crimes. So this is a very serious topic. And when all of those debts are paid, the soul is freed from that realm in order to begin again a new cycle, but having gained nothing but a lot of suffering. Some people mistakenly believe that they can take the path through hell as a spiritual path. And this is a very popular concept, even if you may not have heard about it now. It is very popular amongst many groups. In Kabbalah, in Jewish groups, Buddhist Tantra, and Hindu Tantra, this is an extremely popular notion. You may not be introduced to it in the introductory levels of those schools. But as you awaken your conscious negatively, they will start to reveal to you their intention, which is to indulge in the ego, to fatten the ego, to make it as heavy and dense as possible in order to propel themselves through hell. But their logic is all backwards because they ignore karma, cause and effect. They think that by making a big fat ego, they can project themselves out the other side more rapidly and acquire more knowledge. But they are ignoring karma. Everything you do has a consequence. Every time they deepen an ego, they acquire consequences for that must be paid. Suffering is deepened. They are delaying their progress and committing crimes. So be aware of what you study. What you see on this chart that shows the heavens and hells are levels of nature. The heavens correspond to regions of light that we can't perceive with our physical senses. And the hells also to opposed regions of light that we can't perceive with our physical senses. In other words, the heavens relate to ultraviolet levels of light, and the hells to infrared. Another thing to clarify for you is that these forms of light, these levels of existence, are not in some other place. They are right here. We just don't see it. Your consciousness can develop the ability to see it if you awaken.